All right, well, welcome everyone to another Life Skills South Florida CEU. Thank you so much for joining us. I know I see a few more people still trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get started though, since it's just a few minutes after the hour. So again, welcome. If you're joining us for the first time, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and introduce Life Skills South Florida. My name is Amanda Bassos, and I am the Regional Clinical Outreach Director for Life Skills South Florida. And we are a dually licensed treatment facility where we offer clinical care for adults who present both with complex psychiatric disorders and substance use disorders. And we offer a full continuum of care now for 30 years based here in South Florida, from residential treatment care all the way to outpatient care, including PHP, IOP, and transitional housing as an option for our clients. Now, given that we serve adults with so many complex clinical presentations, we offer the clinical care that we do in our 6 evidence-based clinical pathways. In addition to both primary and group therapy that our clients receive, we also offer family programming to all of our clients and their families, and that includes weekly family sessions, family interventions, and a family weekend by invitation only. And we have a robust clinical team made up of doctoral and master's level professionals, all with national certifications within the areas of their respective specialties. Now for today's CEU, we're joined by Life Skills South Florida's Associate Director of Family Services, Austin Celestin. Austin is a licensed mental health counselor, a marriage and family therapist, nationally trained in EMDR, and DBT intensively trained through the Linehan Institute. Austin, thank you so much for joining us today, for providing our CEU on the impact of family systems on mental health. We're excited to learn from you, very eager for this presentation. So I welcome you, I thank you, and I'm going to turn it completely over to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Really appreciate the introduction. Welcome everyone to the Impact of Family Systems. Again, Austin Celestin, Associate Director. I'm trained both in individual and marriage and family therapy. And I think what made me go into both was to really get a good perception of how the individual compares to the family. And for me in grad school, Bowen was the theory that really fit like a glove. I did my comps in Bowen, I studied Bowen over the last 10 years. It is really the guiding principle and the guiding program, the guiding philosophy I use and our team here uses when we're assessing families. And so I think the job of our therapists here is to use this therapy and use this theory in conceptualizing and intervening on issues that prevent wellness within the family system. We're going to be using that term a lot, family system, because in Bowen we look at the family as a whole, not just the individual that comes to treatment, but also the parents, the spouses that may be playing a role in either maintaining or preventing the illness. When we're reviewing fifth system dynamics, the family therapist will help both the family and the client gain insight. We're always looking for impact points to look at disruptions within the family unit. And the major emotion that we're looking here for is anxiety. At Life Skills, we've coordinated our program around the STEER philosophy: support, training, empowerment, education, and recovery. We use these principles and guiding values when it comes to our family program and when it comes to how our therapists, not just the family therapist, but also the individual therapist, interact with families as a whole. So our learning objectives today are really simple. We're going to really look at the theories and key concept of Bowen structure. We're going to identify the roles of the clinicians when you're using Bowenian systems theories. And we're going to describe how we incorporate Bowen theory into our STEER philosophy here in helping families. So obviously there's a brief bio. I think one of the major important things that when looking at Bowen is that Bowen, while at Menninger and other programs, recognize what was happening with his clients, the schizophrenic clients in particular, and how those clients would get stabilized at the facility, get stabilized in treatment, go home, decompensate, and come back. So he really wanted to look at how the family played a role in dynamics, emotions, and personality. One thing when we're looking at Bowen theory is that there is this interdependence between the family and the client. It's a symbiotic relationship. All that means is that what happens to one affects the other. What happens to mom and dad affects the child. What happens to the child affects mom and dad. What made this so novel is really the difference between individual and family therapy. Being an individual therapist myself and being trained in family therapy as well, I do see that at times as an individual therapist, I'm not really focusing on what's happening with the family of origin. So I do think what Bowen did is really helped us, not the first, but really helped us really observe how do you feel watching the video. Some of the things I want you to pay attention to as well is tone. What tone of conversation, what tone of arguments do you think this family has? The affect, how do people react to emotions in this family? Verbal and nonverbal communication, what the impact of violence may have on this family. Remember, we're looking at 3 generations in this video. So you have the client, which will be Katie, we'll call her Katie. So she's the young girl at the end of the video. We'll call Kelly Clarkson's husband, John. And so you have Kelly, John, and then you have their daughter, we'll call Katie. And then you have obviously Kelly Clarkson's parents, who we saw in the beginning of the video. So now Katie's 19 years old. She comes to your facility. She has a history of depression. She has a history of anxiety, cannabis use disorder. And she's coming for individual therapy and family therapy. While intake, her parents, which are her main support, report a history of domestic violence, substance abuse, abandonment. The parents did go to couples counseling in the past and have reconciled the majority of their issues. You find that the parents were very candid about their own history as well as the issues in their families of origin. And so families of origin, you'll see FOO to represent family of origin. So a lot of the work we're doing is when we're working with Katie, we're trying to assess her family of origin. In this case, it's Kelly and John. However, if you want to do further work, you might look at the family of origin of Kelly and John. So the hierarchical levels of family therapy can go up as much as 4 generations if you choose to. In assessing Katie, you find her to be reserved, somewhat detached and ambivalent about her substance abuse. The parents are local, so you're lucky. The parents are local and are willing to participate in family therapy. A genogram. A lot of us saw this in grad school. A lot of us saw this in postdoc, maybe even undergrad. But the genogram serves, it's a bunch of images, right? A bunch of squares and circles. Squares represent male, females, or circles. And we're really looking at a map of the family. For me, for instance, genograms serve a lot of therapeutic purposes. I like to do the genogram in the first session, after an intake, after getting a family history. For me, I find it very helpful to do a genogram, and if I can do it in person, even better, with both client and family in the room. I typically would get a big whiteboard and just draw it out as the family processes their history. The genogram is useful in understanding the relational behaviors and patterns from one generation to another. So in this particular family, we're not only looking at Katie, our client, and not only looking at Kelly, who's in the room, we're also looking at Kelly's parents, who might not be in the room. And we need to find that context of how that affected Kelly and how it's affecting Katie. Constructing a genogram in therapy session provides us an opportunity to divulge into different aspects of themselves. You're helping the clients gain insight into those maladaptive patterns that their family has had. From my experience, it does provide an opportunity for the entire family to speak rationally about both historical patterns and emotions. Sometimes a genogram detaches the loved ones, detaches the family from all the intensity of the emotions. Sometimes I've seen family members connect during a genogram, where they may have been distant. They can look at how grandma's behavior affected mom's behavior, was affecting my behavior. It's definitely an educational tool. The clinicians educate through observed patterns, how the family operates. We're looking at values, beliefs, wishes, career choices. We're looking at trauma. Sometimes trauma is even passed down. So we really have to really use the genogram to our efforts and to our benefits when working with families. Here's one example of a genogram. There's books on genograms. There will be famous families. You know, I've seen the Kennedy's genogram. You can see a lot of issues and a lot of patterns that are repeating themselves. I've seen careers get repeated. I've seen educational value get repeated. I've seen trauma get repeated, mental health. Also, you can also track biological health. So you're tracking cancer, you're tracking mental illness, addiction, all those things can be tracked. And sadly, you'll see how roles repeat themselves with a family. All right, so I really want to go into the interrelated therapeutic concepts for family systems. And the first one primarily is differentiation of self. And the easiest way I explain it to clients is that every child born into a family is trying to separate. Every child is trying to differentiate themselves from their family of origin. Being able to be intimate and independent of your family is always that critical thrust that young people, as they progress through life, are trying to fight. Differentiation of self is the ability to be emotionally contact with others, yet autonomous in one's own emotional functioning in the essence of the concept of differentiation. It's a scale from high to low, right? So differentiated, fully differentiated people versus basic self versus pseudo self. It's an emotional process. It's a process that can be lifelong, from the time of birth to the time that you pass away. And so it's not necessarily that something that happens once you move out. It's a balance of the self versus your family of origin. So think about yourself in your own family of origin. How easy was it for you to separate? How easy was it for you to stay connected? And what was that struggle you were going through? It may have been the first time you went to college, the first time you purchased a home, when you yourself became a parent. When did you notice that you were fully independent? When did you notice that you can actually separate what's happening at your family of origin versus your new family? Here's the thing about family of origin, and here's the thing about differentiation. If you're pretty highly differentiated, obviously you're much more healthier, right? You are able to be self-sufficient, emotionally aware or emotionally intelligent. You develop your own beliefs. Remember, a lot of our belief system comes from our first teachers, which are our parents, and their parents taught them that. And so are you able to kind of create your own perception of what the world is? Your life is pretty much under control. You're less rigid. You're much more flexible in thinking, much more flexible in your emotions. Your principles are balanced. You definitely have stronger and appropriate boundaries. And you're able to be intimate, like I said, yet independent. But if you're on the low end of differentiation, so these are people, if you're looking at it at a scale, you know, some scales I've seen go from 0 to 40 as pretty low, and then 75 to 100 pretty high differentiated. If you're low on that scale, your beliefs mainly come from others. You're impressionable. Codependency, emotional entanglement, those are where those terms come from, because now you're much more dependent on your family of origin. You have a lack of awareness, for sure. You're reactive in relationships because you're more emotional. You have less tolerance for emotions like anxiety or frustration or sadness. Overall, you're going to be less stable, and you'll be the individual that is easily cut off from relationships. If an argument occurs, if stressors arise in the relationship, it's easier for you to physically or emotionally cut off in relationships, partly due to your poor response to family anxiety. The next concept is the nuclear family emotional system. And really, all this is about how the family emotions, how the nuclear family, how those systems interplay with one another in the family of origin. So the degree to which the undifferentiated of the nuclear family system is absorbed in one relationship or in the poor function of one person. What we're looking for here are the conflicts that happen within the nuclear family. The resulting anxiety causes clinical problems and clinical symptoms. The family is the client. And so we have to remember that in family systems. A lot of times we consider the IP the client in individual therapy, but in family therapy, the family is the client. So some of the three major conflictual issues we're looking at in what's maintaining the problems in the family is obviously marital conflict. So if mom and dad are having a lot of tension, as the tension increases between the spouses, they have to find a way to externalize their anxiety, externalize their fears, and that's when they might triangulate another person or thing. Each focuses on what's wrong with the other, each tries to control the other, and each other resists the efforts of control. Dysfunction in one spouse pressures the other to think or act in a certain way, and the other yields to the pressure. So this is a less differentiated individual in a spousal relationship. This person has their issues, and so the more, let's say, dominant individual in the relationship tries to fix them, tries to control them. Both spouses accommodate to preserve the harmony. So when we're looking at family therapy, we really, if you remember your biology class, systems therapy says everything is trying to find homeostasis. It's trying to find its balance. So couples find their balances with their children, with each other. So if one's dominant, the other might be subservient. If one is overly reactive, the other one might be underreactive. If one has really strong, rigid boundaries, the other one has passive boundaries. The last one is impairment of one or two or one or more children. The focus becomes the children now. So the spouses focus all their anxiety on the children. This excessive worry causes more reactivity within the siblings and their attitudes, needs, and expectations of the parents. You'll see when I used to work with children, if there's a dynamic of, let's say, two siblings and one sibling is getting all the attention because of their poor behavior, sooner or later, the other sibling will start to act up to get that same attention. It's just that one is being neglected, the other one wants the attention. So they find that other one is going to find the way to kind of get the balance, get its needs met. The other concept that we really have to look at is a family projection concept. How do families communicate their wishes? How do they transmit their emotional problems? How do the spouses in particular project onto their children? The projection process can impair the functioning of one or more children and increase their vulnerability to clinical symptoms. So this is how it works. One child is chosen and is triangulated into the marital relationship. Many factors play a role in this. So one thing that we have to look at is birth order, gender, and maybe one child has a special relationship with another parent. When this happens, this prevents the child from being differentiated. So remember, now one parent is kind of attached themselves to a child for whatever reason. Maybe that child is the one that's going to carry on the legacy of the family. Maybe that child is going to carry on the same work history. So for instance, I've seen families where every male firstborn has been lawyers. And so now dad has his firstborn son, and dad kind of absorbs that son and wants the son to go into the family business. What happens though? The son develops a lack of their own individual identity. And that can lead to a lot of stressors when the son says, hey dad, I don't want to be a lawyer, I want to be a baker now, right? So we're looking at that as well. In response to this, the child reacts emotionally. So now the child is being told what to do. There's a lack of independence. There's a lack of autonomy. As a parent expects, the child reacts. And so now when the child reacts, the parent gets even more reinforced. And now the parent's fears are even heightened. And so they get a little bit more entrenched into the child. All right? So that's how the family projection process works. In this video, we can see possibly, let's say, Kathy would react the same way that Kelly acted when her father was acting up. This will reinforce Kelly's responses, reinforce Kelly's anxieties and fears, and therefore she might be a little bit overly empathetic towards her daughter, might be a little bit more protective towards her daughter, causing a level of distress, causing a level of distress in the family. The next concept is the multi-generational transmission process. Through this process, children may emerge from their family of origin being less differentiated than their parents and will tend to marry someone equally or less differentiated, thus perpetuating the process. It's easy to assume that if we looked at John's family in this video, so Kelly's husband, it's easy to assume that he may have experienced the same sort of violence that Kelly's parents did towards Kelly when she was growing up. It's easy to assume that we have two people here that are poorly differentiated. Studies show, research show that two differentiated individuals will probably, like it says here, get together, right? Because of the same emotional concept. The thing about that is family patterns will repeat themselves. So if you look at the video, although Kelly and John's, the violence wasn't as depicted as it was in her family, you can see inklings of it with them throwing or possibly throwing the framed picture with the yelling in the beginning of the video. Specific family roles will play themselves out for sure. Fusion with the child, fusion with the spouse, discord in the family, poor communication pattern, that will continue. Beliefs and ideals are passed along. So we can't forget, remember, parents are your children's first teachers. And so you teach your children how to communicate. You teach your children how to deal with conflict, how to deal with emotions. And so if you're a child observing mom and dad fighting, and you, when you were a child, observe your mom and dad fighting, we can see how this process continues. Also, the family possesses emotions. Deal with conflict and interactions are also passed on. So again, the emotionality, the affect, the issues that may be occurring with family members become passed on. So obviously there's genetic propensity for certain things, but if you grew up seeing mom and dad abuse substances to deal with their issues, there's a high likelihood that you're going to do the same thing as well. And there's a high likelihood that your mom and dad observed it from their mom and dad and such and such. One key component that we talk a lot about in systems theory is triangulation. You can do a whole talk on triangulation and emotional cutoffs. It's really the thing that once anxiety becomes overbearing in the system, the individuals form triangle. One example I have of this is working once with a family of 4 daughters, all about 2 years apart. And I had the third daughter as our client here at Life Skills. And mom and dad looked pretty similar to the video growing up. She was the third in line, and she became very reserved. Her older 2 sisters were the ones that would fight dad when dad would get physical with mom. The older 2 sisters would defend their younger 2 sisters. And the third daughter struggled on how to absorb that anxiety. She would go into her room, she would isolate, she would protect her youngest sister, while the other 2 sisters would try to diffuse the situation. This went on for most of the kids' teenage years, most of their kids' younger years. The two eldest daughters, though, decided to leave. Once they became college age, they left. They went to California. And this was a family from Florida. And they went to California. So the third daughter then had to take up that role to defend mom. Around the time where the third daughter is, I think 19 or 20, mom developed cancer. So now not only is she defending mom from dad, she now becomes a caretaker for mom. And now as being a caretaker for mom, she loses all individuality. She has become, because of her older 2 sisters, They left. She now has become triangulated in so many different ways, to the point where she became the second wife in the household because mom was ill. Triangulation or triangling is defined by the AMFT as a process that occurs when a third person is introduced into a dyadic relationship to balance the excessive intimacy, conflict, or distance to provide stability in the system. So mom and dad are fighting. One of the daughters goes in and defends mom. That daughter automatically becomes triangulated. The second daughter does the same thing. So now you have a kind of another set of triangles. And now once these two daughters left to go to California, the third daughter, who was our client, she becomes triangulated. When two people become anxious to triangle, they triangle in a third person or thing. So the key thing is not only people get triangulated, objects gets triangulated, things become triangulated. You can triangulate the garage when you get into a fight with your wife. You can triangulate work, to be honest with you. You can definitely triangulate drugs. All those things become an outlet for you on how to deal with the anxiety or the conflict. We all have that behavior we engage in. Obviously in family therapy, we're looking at individuals, but if you're working with couples, and they have no children, something is getting triangulated. Maybe mom, maybe the husband or wife's work, maybe another friend, maybe the in-laws. It's an automatic thing. Think about the last fight you were in. Didn't you try to grab somebody in to kind of support you and be on your side? Something that we automatically do. So it's neither good or bad, it just is. Our role is, though, to help clients recognize that there are triangulations occurring. At a high level of tension, the outside position becomes the most desirable. So what that means is I want to remove myself from the anxiety. I want to take away myself from the anxiety, and that's the most desirable thing. Typically amongst couples, it might be more desirable for the husband to not feel the anxiety. So this is when he leaves or she may leave to absorb the anxiety. Triangles contribute significantly to the development of clinical issues. You can see how the third person absorbing all the anxiety, all the struggles and issues can lead to intense emotions and intense anxiety within the family system. Correlating or similar to that is the emotional cutoffs. So in the example where I described the two daughters moving to California, that was a 3,000-mile cutoff physically and an emotional cutoff to the point where they had no relationship with their father 10 years later. Cutoff is a process of separation, isolation, withdrawal, running away, or denying the importance of the parental family. This came from Bowen studying runaways. This came from Bowen looking at how teenagers were running away and what was causing them to run away. The concept of the emotional cutoff describes people's ability to manage their unresolved emotional issues with parents, siblings, or other family members by reducing the actual contact, the emotional contact, the physical contact completely with them. Every family has a cutoff. Every single family has a cutoff. If you don't know who that cutoff is, it's probably you, right? It occurs when extremely fused families where triangulation is a pattern. Remember, triangulation is going to happen, but the fusion of triangulation is something that we have to assess. Leaving does not equal greater sense of differentiation. So a cutoff is not an example of someone who's highly differentiated. A cutoff is literally someone running away from the problem. Someone who's differentiated can separate themselves healthily from the problem. Certain basic patterns between parent and child are replicas from the past and will repeat themselves in the next generation. So it's easy to assume that two people that are cut off from their families may get together because they have the same emotional concept, the same emotional reactions, the same emotional perception of things. Persons who cut off will likely cut off again when faced with anxiety-provoking relationships. And so again, going back to my example and going back to our case study, you can see how perhaps Kelly decided to cut off from her family of origin once her father left the family. And maybe you can see how Katie may have been able to do the same if her father John left the family. And the example I shared here, the real life example, the daughters married men who were completely different from their father, and they were able to kind of, because of that, I think their relationship became extremely stable. The client who was here, she struggled. She struggled in identity. She struggled in personality issues. She struggled with trauma. She struggled with anxiety. For her, she was identified as the IP. She held all the anxiety, all the pressures, all the sadness, emotions of the family. And so all that came down on her. And obviously, she struggled with maintaining relationships. She struggled with maintaining her mental health. She struggled with maintaining her physical health. All those things was an issue of her not being able to differentiate and being triangulated too much and too often. One concept that I skipped was sibling position by Tomlin. So if you do want to study that more, by all means, that's part of like recognizing first child, second child, third child. This work was incorporated later into Bowen system theory. So the goals for therapy. So this is what your goals are as a clinician. Right? The role of the therapist is to help one or more family members move toward a higher level of differentiation. So your goal as a clinician is to help the family, help each member of the family move towards healthier boundaries, move towards stronger emotional intelligence, more structure in their lives, and more ability to balance their emotion. The clinician serves as an observer and a historian. So, part of systems theory is to kind of let the fight happen. Part of the system is to just observe from an outside perspective, not not incorporating your own influences or biases into the session or into the family dynamics. You're just an observer. When the individuals in the family system gain awareness of these patterns, they can become more differentiated, and their maintenance of anxiety and formation of triangles can be greatly diminished. So obviously, once an individual is more differentiated, maybe the father, maybe the child, maybe the mother, whoever becomes more differentiated, you can begin to see a diffusion of the tension and anxiety in the family. The therapist in session serves as a way to detriangulate the most problematic duo. Sometimes the saying is the only people that can get triangulated in therapy is the therapist. The therapist has the correct emotional boundaries, the correct emotional experience to be able to help the two people that are dealing with the issues solve their problem. In essence, the therapist absorbs the anxiety, right? So your own emotional awareness, your own issues of transference are greatly important in being a Bowenian therapist. The therapist models and coaches effective ways to be less reactive while also referencing past failed attempts being ineffective with conflict resolution. You're in control of the emotional tone, so you can't forget that. You can't let the fight get too intense, but you also have to be there to observe it. You're directing the flow of information and preventing reactive exchanges in the couples or dyads. The therapist, although in the system, cannot be picking sides. You can't be triangulating. You can't pick Kelly over John. You can't pick John over Kelly. You have to find a way to be neutral. You have to emphasize I statements, which increases the sense of differentiation and decreases the sense of fusion. I think the reason why systems theory fit well for me was an anthropology minor. And so for me, anthropology is really studying and observing culture and values of societies. I think as a systems therapist and as family therapists overall, we have to be anthropologists. We really have to look and observe the process that maintains this family's culture system, this family's values, what the language is of this family, the meaning and beliefs they put into these behaviors. Why is it being a lawyer is so important to this family? Why is being a nurse so important to this family? So we really have to look at cultural influences when coming with that, immigration issues, first generation, second generation Americans, all those things really have to get played into context as a family therapist. This helps you recognize the family projection and the multi-generational transmission process. And so you're being able to see the patterns in the family. You're being able to see and observe and slightly educate and slightly inform what's going on in the family as a clinician. Obviously, you're trying to transition to a new form of homeostasis. Your role as a therapist is to see if there's conflict, how do I create a new way for this family to deal with conflict? So at Life Skills, I think what made this position so attractive for me at Life Skills is that they actually dedicated a team to family therapy. It wasn't a one-off. It wasn't something that our director, our executive director thought that something should be minimized. Each client that comes to Life Skills gets an individual therapist and a family therapist to work with their issues. My role as a family therapist, like I said, is to use primarily my abilities as a clinician using Bowenian therapy to help the family through the steering program. We're intentional as a family team. So we're not a one-off, we do want to engage in weekly family sessions. So what does support look like? What does training look like? What does empowerment and education look like, and recovery look like here at Life Skills? So obviously the first role is family therapy. Here at Life Skills, we do a detailed family assessment. It can be anywhere from 45 minutes to 60 minutes with the family members and not in the presence of the client that admitted to Life Skills. So now the family members can give as much detail and information as they like. Now the thing is, for the family therapist, they have to take that information and not be very biased against the client, because remember, we're taking a non-biased role. Family therapists will work with the family on a regular basis and serves as their advocate and voice within the treatment team. Each family is encouraged to take advantage of the family therapy work to further develop the existing strengths and identifying areas of growth within the family system. Last week, I'm working with a client. Parents are divorced, and I'm talking about family therapy. This is our second session. And the father asked me straight out, what does this have to do with helping my son? And it was a good question. It wasn't a question about him not wanting to engage. He just didn't know the importance of family therapy. And I told him the micro way to look at this, so the small, minute way, is to help the client with support. Mom and dad being the primary support system, I wanted them to understand the ways they can help the client. But the macro way is to really look at the dysfunction, to really look at what's maintaining this behavior. The father hasn't spoken to his son in 8 months, and yet he's saying, what's the purpose of family therapy? And I told him, it's really to help you develop a relationship with your son. It's really to help you develop insight on what's maintaining these behaviors with your son. And I wasn't as blunt as I am now, but he understood. It made sense to him. I told him, how do we help your son by helping you? Is by recognizing those behaviors that maintain your son's illness, that maintains your codependency, that maintains your enabling of his substance abuse. Saying it that way, that helped him understand the process, that helped him recognize the need for future sessions. Here at Life Skills, we also offer a family alliance group. It's a group led by one of the family therapists, and it's held an hour a week, sometimes up to 90 minutes. It's held weekly and is open to all families within the Life Skills program, current and past families. The support group is designed to unite active Life Skills families and past families for the purpose of gaining a greater understanding of addiction and mental illness. Provides an avenue to connect with families in similar situations and receive skills training from a professional therapist. The Family Alliance calls are great. We talk and we educate the families about family systems. We educate the families about dialectical behavioral therapy. We educate the families about trauma. We're maintaining confidentiality throughout all this, but we're giving the family information. We're giving the family coaching in order to prevent and recognize what's maintaining the issue with their loved ones. They can even speak to the medical director to talk about medication. They can speak to nursing staff. They can speak about many different topics and theories. But the role is to give our families a support system outside of family therapy. Family restructuring, it's typically a 1 to 2 day restructuring experience for families that are in really dire crisis, couples or families. It's typically, like I said, 1 to 2 days of very intentional interventions for the client and their family members. What we're doing is we're really giving a whole day's worth of therapy, observation of groups, participation in groups, to really go into the heart of the matter. So for instance, if the client's here for trauma, then they're going to meet with the trauma therapist and their loved one. They're going to do maybe 2 sessions, maybe even 3 sessions in those 2 days with their family therapist. If we miss the opportunity to do a genogram, we'll do it there in the family restructuring experience. It provides the family an opportunity to participate in a tailored therapeutic process with the entire team. It takes place on our main campus. So obviously the client's loved ones are staying off campus and they come in and they visit, and they'll go through the entire clinical day with their loved ones. It's really important that the family department engages the individual therapist with this particular restructuring, as well as the clinical team, because they'll have a loved one participating in their groups. They'll have a loved one really doing homework from the groups. And so it really allows for the non-client to gain insight and awareness of what's going on with the client, along with the intensity. The last part, the last component of our family therapy program here at Life Skills is our therapeutic weekend. It's a 3-day therapeutic seminar. It is intense. It's all day Friday, all day Saturday, and half a day on Sunday. On Friday, the portion contains psychoeducation. So similar to our Alliance group, now it's a little bit more intentional. Now there's a more direct Q&A issue, or a direct Q&A position with the therapist that runs the DBT group, with the therapist that does the trauma group. The families fly in and they participate the entire weekend with their loved one. Saturday is experiential exercise, and it's really a reflective team approach where the client and their loved one gets a homework assignment, and we help the families process that homework assignment, as well as the other families reflecting on what they're seeing as that particular family's processing. Sunday is more of a wrap-up day. Sunday, we provide 2 process groups, 2 support groups, one for the family members, one for the clients. It's usually a 90-minute process group, there to help the families process the weekend, process their concerns and fears, but also process what they learned through this experience. The clients, they go through their own process group, and they're acknowledging what happened this weekend. They're processing their fears and concerns. They're looking at changes that they hope to occur with their families moving forward. It's a 3-day therapeutic seminar with the intention to provide families with psychoeducation with all our evidence-based practices. So all the 6 clinical pathways that Amanda spoke about earlier. And thank you for your time, and I'll take questions if there are any.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Austin. That is such a thorough and wonderful presentation, so helpful in terms of providing the clinical family care that you do. And I think I speak for all of us in attendance right now that clearly your passion, your calm really enhances that clinical therapeutic relationship that you have with family systems. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, we do have a few questions that came in. So I'll start with the first one. Is there an assessment questionnaire form to use as a tool for assessing any type of differentiation?
There is actually. There's an actual scale that I use with our families. I can email that out to you, Amanda, if you want to share it with them. And really, it just breaks down what differentiation looks like. I think I have it on my desk. What differentiation, what characteristics we're looking for differentiation. So I'll read off some of the, and it's the, if you Google Murray-Bowen scale of differentiation adapted, it should pop up. It's by, it's referenced by Bowen and the family evaluation. So for instance, if you're looking at a scale from 85 to 95, this individual is principle-oriented and goal-directed, not prone to engage in polarized debates, realistic self-image, low to no anxiety, so that's hard, right? Low to no anxiety, excellent personal boundaries, free to enjoy relationships, not dogmatic or rigid in thinking. So that's your 85 to 95 scale. It then goes down to another box, which is 75, so I won't read all of them. Someone who's a 75, around that range, can be calm in troubled times, good boundaries, more real, does not seek approval. Someone who's at a 60 range acts more on the basis of reason and intelligent than simply reacting to feelings. In relationship, hesitates to say what he or she thinks, can hide truth, thoughts, feelings, sad. Now I'm gonna, like I said, from 0 to 40 are your poor differentiation. So for instance, someone who's like at a 0 to 25 lives in a feeling world. So you're all id, all emotion, difficulty maintaining long-term relationships, functioning almost entirely governed by emotional reaction. So this list is a pretty good adapted list that I'll use with families. I actually used it in group yesterday. And to hear the clients, well, that's one component. We do have a family dynamics group that's held on Mondays with both therapists at 3:30. So my caseload is typically my process group, or all my clients. And so I actually use this, and you can see the insight that the clients have in themselves, where they didn't all put themselves at 85 or 95. Some of them were like, I'm a 40, I'm a 60, I'm a 30. And so they have the insight because they know what's happening when they read the description. So it's a really good, if you really want to use system series, a really safe, simple sheet to use to look at the scale of differentiation.
Great, absolutely. We'll include that recommendation in the email that we send as well for anybody interested. Here's another question for you, Austin. Why would the first session in family not include the patient? Would that not provide a better assessment of the entire system?
Well, here's the thing. The client, that's a great question. And the first session is our family assessment. Prior to admission, the admission team would have done an assessment with the client. And so the client's already done that. And remember, yes, it is somewhat flawed. So that's why it's a great question, because it does provide context based from the family's perspective. So what I like to do is, after the assessment, have my own session with the client before therapy. Now, I'm not saying mom and dad said this, but what really it is a continuation of the intake process and really gathering information on the system. And it is, like I said, it could be biased. And so as a clinician, you have to be able to kind of check yourself out of that. Also, another issue that might occur, a lot of our clients are fairly acute. And so usually that first week or two, if we're working with a client with a substance abuse issue, there still might be in the haze of detox or pause. Sometimes our clients have severe clinical issues as far as bipolar or psychosis, and so they really haven't stabilized yet. So there are times where the family therapy might begin a month into treatment, honestly, until the client becomes psychiatrically stable. But by gathering the support and the information from the family, we are able to address the system that way until the client is psychiatrically, clinically, or behaviorally appropriate to join family therapy. I've done the assessment with clients before, and I learned that the client not being stable can become very combative during the assessment. And so we're trying to prevent that combativeness within that first actual session, or that first clinical contact between the family therapist and the family.
Absolutely. That makes sense and that's helpful, and certainly up to clinical determination at that point.
Right.
One other question, what training or resources for clinicians, other professionals, might you recommend to enhance family therapeutic skills?
Well, there's nearly 16 family therapy models, right? I know for Bowen, there are institutes that offer fellowships programs if you want to really go into Bowen. So the Bowen Institute. We have the South Florida Bowen Institute down here that is offering a fellowship. I just checked their website. I believe it's an 8-month fellowship program. It's held on Saturday, so it's an all-day Saturday issue for about 8 months, and you become a fellow in Bowen. So that's just Bowen theory. So really, for me, I have a dual master's. So I have a double master's in individual therapy, American family therapy. So I was kind of privileged to go into that, being an MFT. But of course, if you want to continue your interest in, let's say, systems or structural, so those are two of many out there. There's definitely fellowship opportunities in those particular associations. You also might want to look into CEUs as well. Bowen is not, I find it to be very somewhat regimented because the theoretical approaches are there and pretty much in black and white. So all you're doing as a Bowen clinician is looking for those approaches. So you're looking for the cutoffs, you're looking for the triangulations, you're looking for the multi-generational transmission process. Once you see that, your instincts will kick in as a clinician on how to intervene. And so once you learn those concepts, obviously you can always get perfected on those concepts, but once you learn those concepts, it can really be helpful in your work as a clinician, especially as a family therapist.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Austin. I know we received a few more questions, so we'll follow up via email for the sake of time. But
Sure.
We are so grateful for your time and this presentation. To all of our guests who attended today, thank you so much. We hope that you found this helpful. You will receive an email with an evaluation to complete, and from there you'll receive the CEU credits along with the PDF version of Austin's presentation and a recorded session from today. So you can always go back and re-listen to all of the words of wisdom from Austin today. So thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Austin, and we'll see you again real soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.